Some nice shiny forks we have there on the bench, Will. What are you showing us today?
So we're going to look at suspension forks and all the knobs and dials and allow you to set your bike up as best you can for riding and hopefully tell you guys something you didn't know about suspension forks. So to start off, this is your fork. So you've usually got a damping leg on the right-hand side and a spring leg on the left-hand side. However, Öhlins do it the other way around. I don't know why. You'll know what your spring leg is because you'll have a valve or you have a preload adjuster on top of the spring leg. You'll have an O-ring, which tells you how much sag you're running. And then the first thing you need to set up in terms of knobs and dials is your rebound knob. So Max, if you zoom in on that. This is a jackalope and this is a tortoise. But for all intents and purposes, it's a hare. So that is faster rebound that way. And then slower rebound this way.
Okay. So
that's how RockShox do it. This is how Fox and Mazzocchi do it. So you can see here, there's a minus and it says fast and a plus and it says slow. So the plus means more damping. It doesn't mean faster, it means more resistance.
Okay.
So you're gonna have a whole number of clicks there. And the idea is you want to match the rebound speed to the spring rate you're running. So this is why manufacturers give you the adjustable rebound, because if you're a bigger rider or you like a firmer fork, you're going to want a stiffer spring rate and you're going to need more resistance from the rebound damping to allow the fork to return to the sag point at the rate that you want it to. So more spring rate, heavier rider means more rebound damping. The damping rate you're going to run is personal preference. Some people like a faster fork, some people like a slower fork, but there is a window, and outside of that window, you're not gonna have good handling. So up to a point, it is personal preference, but you don't want it too fast, or it's gonna be like returning and trying to like push the bars out of your hands, and you don't want it too slow, because then you're gonna find that the fork is packing down and not recovering after each bump.
So would you do rebound before you do any of your compression settings?
Yes. So some forks don't have adjustable compression damping. So that kind of tells you that your rebound is more important. So you want rebound to match your spring rate. It's a safety thing.
Okay.
Most good quality forks will have a rebound adjuster. Now, the next thing we're going to get into is high and low speed rebound. So I'm going to bring this bike over because I don't have a fork on the bench with high and low speed.
One of many shiny bikes.
This one's extra shiny though, it's gold. And it is an e-bike. So under this dust cover, you've got your high speed and your low speed rebound. HSR, high speed rebound adjuster knob, LSR, low speed rebound adjuster. So sometimes it's beneficial to separate your rebound circuit, to separate the adjustment between the high speed and the low speed. Now, most rebound knobs on more budget forks will just do one. So they'll just do either your high or your low speed or a mix of both. These are the Fox Performance Elite forks, so you get more adjusters. So you can adjust your high speed and your low speed rebound separately.
All right, that's all well and good, Will, but what is the difference between high and low speed rebound?
So the high and the low speed refer to like the shaft speed, so how fast the suspension's moving, not how fast the bike is moving. So if your fork is extending quickly, say from like deep in the stroke, or you're pulling the front of the bike off the ground. So you're putting loads of weight and energy into extending that suspension. That's your high speed rebound. So if you're deep in the stroke, bottomed out, and then it wants to extend again, that's high speed. So if that feels uncontrolled, then you want less high speed rebound damping. So you want to wind that out. So anti-clockwise. Low speed rebound is like slower oscillations, so maybe coming over a rise, or maybe like if you're braking and the suspension is returning from being like compressed deeper in the stroke. So you got two different circuits there, and the clever wizardry inside, which we'll get into in a future video, allows you to tune them separately.
I personally like to hit big jumps, and I'm not that keen on like tech and lots of rough stuff. So how should someone like me really set up their rebound?
I wouldn't say there's necessarily like a massive difference if you just like doing big jumps, because like I say, it's within a threshold. You want it to return to the sag point in like a controlled way. And to some people, they want it a bit faster, some people want it a bit slower.
I guess it's quite subjective.
Yeah, I think if you were doing lots of jumps, you could potentially run it slower because you're going to have less like high frequency bumps. But I tend to want my bike set up in a way that means they work for all conditions at all times. You'll find that a lot of World Cup riders, they will go faster or slower based on the conditions, but it's within a realm of like, they've got the bike set up how they like it and how it works for them. So they're gonna change the bike for the conditions, but they're not gonna like have, they're unlikely to vary massively from where they feel comfortable.
So what are we talking about now then?
Okay, lockout and pedal thresholds. So this will usually be at the top of your damping leg, so the right leg. So you can see this one, it's got open, pedal and firm. This is a RockShox fork. So open is where it is now. So it's nice and compliant for going across rough stuff. Pedal is like an intermediate setting, and firm is like not locked out, but like a firm threshold to press against. So you're getting maximum efficiency. And
will you find that on most like intermediate forks or beginner forks, or is it more just like an advanced fork?
It tends to be forks that are, say, trail or cross country, because if you're riding downhill, you're not really going to want the pedal threshold.
No.
Although, if you're looking at the most modern crop of World Cup races, there are all sorts of funky buttons on Loic Bruni's handlebars that people do seem to think are a damping threshold. So yeah, I can't tell you any more than that. I wish I could. Yeah, this is a modern RockShox SID. So this again, open, in the middle, and then firm.
Great.
Basically, inside here, there's something stopping the damping fluid moving between two chambers. So if you lock this, if you've got the threshold, it means it's hard for the fluid to move between the two chambers. And that makes a platform, a threshold, that you can pedal and it'll be nice and efficient. It won't bob around all over the place.
Okay, that makes sense. So say for instance, I've got it completely locked out and I go smashing into a nice fat tree root. Am I gonna blow the fork up?
That's a great question. And if you had a true lockout where the fork was locked, then potentially you could do some damage if your fork's 20 or 30 years old. Modern forks, they have a blow off. So engineered in there is the ability for the damping circuit to just blow through and let all the oil through quickly between the two chambers if you hit something hard. So you're not going to break your fork if you hit a bump when it's locked out.
Okay, so that's just a general safety feature included in most forks with a lockout option or firming option?
Yeah, it's like safety in a sense of like it won't break your fork, and it's safety in a sense of you can maintain control of the bike.
Okay.
It's not going to be the most comfy if you hit a bump with it locked out, but there's some degree of compliance built in.
I think we've all done it at some time in our lives where we've got to the bottom of the trail and gone, oh no, my fork was locked.
Yeah, why are my arms hurting?
Yeah, why do I have arm pump right now?
All too common, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so next we're going to look at compression damping. So at the top of this fork, you can see there's your pedaling threshold there, but beneath that, you've got a compression adjuster. Now, compression damping, it adds damping resistance to you compressing the fork. So when you're pushing down and the fork is moving down through its travel, the compression damping controls the rate at which you can use that travel. More compression damping towards the plus means like more resistance, and then less means open, and it means the suspension can move with less resistance.
Okay, so this one has only low speed compression adjustment, is that right?
Yes, just low speed compression adjuster. So it will have a high speed compression damping circuit to control the fork when it's moving very quickly through the travel, but you can't adjust it, that's fixed from the factory. Whereas your low speed compression adjuster, that adjusts your low speed threshold. So with your low speed, imagine like some fluid being like bled off slowly through a system. And then with your high speed, imagine it's just like that threshold is overwhelmed and it's suddenly splashing through with no resistance. That's basically what's happening in here. So there's a piston with a bypass that allows a very small amount of fluid to flow through. And then if you move it faster and you overwhelm that, then shims will move out of the way and let all the fluid just crash through to the other side. So you get that compliance if you hit a big bump hard. So that's why you need the two circuits. We're moving back to the the Fox Performance Elite. So you've got adjustable low speed compression and adjustable high speed compression. Now, high speed compression is when the shaft speed of the fork is fast. So perhaps you've just hit some stutter bumps at speed, or you've just landed like a big jump or big drop, and that fork's moving very quickly. That high speed adjustment means that you can control how fast you use that travel. And the low speed adjuster will be for things like braking. So if you're putting on the front brake and you're on a steep section of track, how fast that fork sinks. So you need to control that based on your body weight and based on your riding style. If you find yourself too deep in the travel, you may find that you need to up your compression damping, so run more compression damping. But your spring rate also controls how fast you use that travel, so you have more resistance from the spring as well as more resistance to the damper. And you can start looking at volume spaces as well. That changes your spring curve as well. So spring rate we're going to look at in more detail in a future video, but for now what you need to know is your high speed adjuster controls how much resistance you get from the damper. At high speed, big hits or fast stuttery hits, and the low speed adjuster controls things like as you go up the face of a jump or round a berm or under braking. So as your weight shifts on the bike or you G out.
I see. What are you doing up there?
I'm getting some volume spacers. We've got a good collection of forks and shocks in here. And these little bad boys, these are volume spacers.
What do they do?
I'll explain when I'm not up a ladder. Right, so volume spacers go in the spring leg of your fork if you have an air spring. And you can run one, or you can join them together. You can have two, you can have three.
It's a bit like Lego, isn't it?
It is, it's very satisfying to do that. So these clip underneath your top cap. So you have to let all the air out your fork, take off the top cap, and they clip underneath. And they literally take up space inside the air chamber. That's all they do. What that means is that as you compress the suspension, the amount of resistance from the spring increases faster. So with a coil spring, you get a linear rising rate. So a graph that looks like that. So the more you push it, the more it pushes back at you all the way through the travel. If you want a progressive rising rate, so you want it to get a lot firmer towards the end of the travel, or the amount it increases to increase faster as you go deeper in the travel, you want an air spring with volume spacers. So if you like a progressive spring, if you're a
active rider?
Yeah, so if you're like a World Cup racer, enduros or downhill, then you're gonna want a more progressive spring because you're gonna want sensitivity around the sag point. So you're gonna want a spring that is compliant around the sag point, and then you're not gonna want it to bottom out harshly if you're doing massive jumps or hitting big holes. So an air spring can really give you that tunability if you want a more progressive rising rate in your spring rate.
All right, so that's all well and good, but who are they for?
They're for everyone, really. If you've got an air-sprung fork, you're gonna have the option to tune these. So most forks these days are supplied with them already fitted. So you've got the ability to make it less progressive, so the rate to increase more slowly if you find you're not using a lot of your suspension travel, or conversely, if you find you're bottoming out a lot, but you're running the spring rate recommended by the manufacturer, you can run more of them. So they're a really easy and cheap way to customize your fork to your kind of riding.
Oh, amazing. All right, so we've looked at both top cap dials and what they do, and I feel like you've explained it very well to me, but what are these things over here?
I think they just call them bleed valves, yeah. So the idea is, it comes from motocross. Any air that is trapped inside the bottom of the fork, it can change how the fork feels. So for example, if you're somewhere where you're changing altitude between the top and the bottom of a track, or the fork's getting very hot, you want to let the air out that is trapped in your lowers.
Okay.
And I think Fox have patented this now, so I think this is just a Fox thing.
I've got a quick question about the rear of the bike, actually. So everything we've talked about with the adjustment on the front, is it all replicatable on the rear shock?
Yeah, pretty much. Like the same things apply. You can get high and low speed damping adjusters. You can get a lockout threshold, volume spacers, all on the back. Slightly different in terms of like how you might choose to use them based on like how the bike performs under braking. So if you think of your fork things like your low speed compression, it involves you like when you're braking, the weight goes onto the fork, whereas on the back of the bike, the weight comes off the back of the bike when you're braking. Right. So small changes, small differences, but essentially it's the same thing. But we will cover shocks in a future video.
All right, thanks for all your top tips, Will. Found that very useful, and I think I'm a little bit more knowledgeable now on how my forks work, so thanks.
No worries. And if you want some tips on how to improve your brakes, click this link here.
Nice.